Daniel squinted at the hyperdrive interface, which was currently ejecting tiny metallic screws like confetti at a particularly aggressive parade. Why do I always get the machines that hate me? He muttered, diving to catch a screw before it bounced off his forehead. The manual, or more accurately, the digital holographic projection of the manual, kept insisting that everything was simple. Simple, Daniel decided, was apparently the universe's way of saying, "Good luck, mortal." The Starliner creaked softly under the weight of its own impatience, the hull humming with low-energy vibrations that suggested it had been designed by engineers with a sense of cruel irony. Somewhere in the corridor, an automated cleaning drone wheezed past, scattering nano-polished particles like glitter in the breeze, and Daniel swore he could feel the machine judging him. He rubbed his temple, wishing he'd paid more attention in the human engineering classes on Mars Station Delta, or at least, wishing that Mars Station Delta had a decent coffee shop. Instead, he had coffee that tasted like burnt metal and a room-temperature toaster pretending to be an espresso machine. It wasn't even good metal, just sad, oxidized metal. "Maybe I should have been a diplomat," he said aloud, knowing full well that diplomacy involved sitting in uncomfortable chairs and listening to people argue about the quantum taxation of planetary moons. At least diplomats didn't have screws flying at their faces. A sudden shiver ran through the observation deck as a commotion erupted near the outer viewport. Daniel, forgetting his hyperdrive battle entirely, skidded toward the source of the noise, slipping on a panel that had the audacity to wobble like it was auditioning for a dance recital. When he rounded the corner, he froze in mid-step. There she was, Liara. She stood with the calm of someone who had clearly survived things far stranger than a human tripping on a wobbling floor panel. Her skin glowed faintly under the neon starlight, almost translucent in a way that made the veins in her long, sweeping ears shimmer like silver threads. Her eyes were too intelligent for a human Starliner's captain to decipher at a glance, reflecting constellations Daniel hadn't even heard of yet. She turned to him, her expression softening, and placed her hand lightly on his shoulder. "You remind me of my husband," she said. Daniel choked on the expletive he hadn't been planning to say, his brain scrambling for words. He wanted to ask if her husband had also spent hours dodging flying screws, or if he had a fondness for misbehaving hyperdrives, but instead he just froze. Somewhere a screw bounced off a console and clinked harmlessly to the floor. Daniel's mouth twitched into something resembling a smile. The absurdity of it all collided with a strange thrill in his chest. Thank you," he said, feeling like an idiot. Did he, have long ears too? Liara blinked once and her lips curved just slightly, the ghost of a smile. Something like that, he was unique. She tilted her head, one of her ears flicking in a movement that reminded Daniel vaguely of a cat trying to balance on a narrow ledge. "You carry the same calm in chaos." What? Daniel tried to laugh because that was what humans did when confronted with inexplicable, otherworldly statements. The laugh caught in his throat and ended somewhere between a cough and a hiccup. "Calm in chaos, huh? I usually just scream at the machines until they obey." She tilted her head again, regarding him with what he decided must be alien amusement. "Your scream might be effective, or at least entertaining." What? The hyperdrive decided that was the perfect moment to emit a high-pitched whistle and eject another screw, which Daniel caught with the kind of reflex born from months of disaster-prone exploration. He held it up like a trophy. "Victory," he announced. "I have tamed the machine for now." Liara's laughter was quiet but musical, like wind chimes in zero gravity. Daniel felt his chest tighten in an unfamiliar way, thrilled, embarrassed, and weirdly honored all at once. She stepped closer, her hand still resting lightly on his shoulder. "You carry yourself well under pressure. Not many humans could catch a screw mid-flight while contemplating the meaning of a compliment." "What? Usually I just run and hope the universe is merciful," Daniel admitted. "Turns out I'm surprisingly good at both." Their conversation wove between absurdity and fascination. Daniel discovered that Liara had a sharp sense of humor that cut through the tension of her own long space travels. She recounted the time she'd attended a gala on the planet Thrin, where her ears had somehow short-circuited an entire chandelier, and Daniel found himself laughing so hard he almost forgot to maintain a respectable posture in zero gravity. He told her about the incident with the micro-black hole and the GPS tracker, which, when explained, sounded far more dangerous than it actually was. Liara's ears twitched in amusement, and she leaned in, examining him with an intensity that made Daniel wonder if she was evaluating whether he would survive their inevitable misadventures together, or whether she simply enjoyed the comedy of human panic. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had a habit of folding on Starliners, and Daniel realized he had been talking more to Liara than to anyone else in years. Their banter was punctuated with absurd moments. A coffee replicator that stubbornly refused to make anything edible, an automated door that seemed to enjoy slamming in his face, and a robot janitor that had taken to following them around like a hyper-efficient but judgmental pet. Each laugh, each glance, each touch of her hand on his shoulder seemed to knit a thread between them, delicate yet resilient, that neither could ignore. At some point, Daniel realized he was staring at her ears again. He had been doing it unconsciously, trying to figure out if they were sensitive, expressive, or just fantastical appendages that made her look regal even when she laughed at his jokes about space debris. Liara, noticing his gaze, flicked one ear and said, "Curiosity is human, I like it." Maybe I'm just fascinated by aliens who also understand sarcasm," Daniel replied. His voice carried the soft, awkward charm that had gotten him into and out of more trouble than he cared to admit. As the Starliner drifted silently through the glittering nebula, Daniel realized two things. One, he had absolutely no idea what he was doing in this galaxy, and two, he was exactly where he wanted to be. Something about Liara, about the warmth of her hand on his shoulder, had ignited a spark he didn't know he was missing. The hyperdrive's incessant whining faded into the background as he watched her study the stars, and for the first time in a long while he laughed, fully, without hesitation, without worry, and with the reckless joy of a human who had just been acknowledged by someone who belonged entirely elsewhere, someone who carried her own kind of gravity. Daniel tried to speak again, to say something clever or profound, but all he managed was, "So, you think your husband would have liked my screw-catching skills?" Liara's laughter echoed through the observation deck, light, airy, contagious, and she nodded. "Perhaps, but if he did, he would have warned you about the coffee." And in that small, ridiculous moment, Daniel understood that space could be terrifying, absurd, and endlessly beautiful all at the same time, and that somehow this alien woman with her long ears and quiet amusement had become his unexpected companion on the road through the stars. Daniel woke to the gentle hum of the Starliner's life systems, which sounded suspiciously like a cat purring through a broken speaker. His head lolled against the cold metal of the observation deck wall, where he had fallen asleep mid-conversation with Liara. He opened one eye and caught her silhouette in the soft starlight, long ears curved in a perfect, lazy arc as she adjusted a holographic chart of nearby stellar anomalies. "I swear she can see the universe and still look casual about it," he muttered under his breath, which was probably audible because Liara turned and smiled without looking up from her chart. "You woke," she said. Her voice carried the kind of calm certainty that made Daniel feel like he was about to either conquer a star or crash into one with equal inevitability. "I was beginning to think the hyperdrive finally won." "What?" "I might have temporarily lost to gravity," Daniel admitted, rubbing the back of his neck where he'd collided with the wall in a less than dignified tangle of limbs. Do you ever nap like this?" "What?" Liara's ears twitched, a gesture Daniel had decided must be equivalent to human smirks. "I prefer to observe. Sleeping is inefficient, though sometimes amusing." She flicked her wrist and a miniature projection of the star map expanded, spinning slowly above her hand. "I watched 3 solar systems implode while you were dreaming. Fascinating patterns, terribly loud if I imagine the sound." Daniel grinned. "I'll keep that in mind next time I choose a nap spot." He leaned against the console, noticing for the first time how her presence seemed to bend the room's atmosphere around her, like the gravity of her personality was gently tugging at everything, including him. "So, you watch suns explode for fun." "Not for fun," Liara corrected, one eyebrow, or whatever the alien equivalent was, raising slightly. "For study, but amusement is often an incidental side effect." She flicked the projection and the stars in the chart reconfigured themselves, each twinkling with a quiet, impatient humor. "You humans laugh at improbable events, do you not?" "I do," Daniel said genuinely. "But sometimes we laugh because it keeps us from screaming at the universe." He paused, "or at hyperdrives." Liara's ears twitched, an unmistakable signal of her amusement. "Then perhaps you are already more resilient than your species admits." She tapped the chart again, and a holographic model of a strange, twisting space station blinked into existence, wobbling like it had a mind of its own. "This is where we are heading next. The colony there has reported anomalies. I suspect something is tampering with local spacetime matrices, or possibly just the janitorial AI which has shown violent tendencies." "What?" Daniel squinted at the projection. "Violent janitorial AI," he raised one hand. "I thought only the humans made things that tried to kill you by accident." Liara's laugh was soft, melodic, and entirely disarming. "Apparently not. Some intelligences find housekeeping existentially challenging, you will see." The journey to the colony was punctuated by Daniel's attempts to master the ship's repulsor lift controls. Every time he believed he was flying straight, the ship veered in dramatic, almost cartoonish arcs, sending them through zero-gravity flips and rotations that left him clutching at consoles like a toddler learning to walk on ice. Liara, seated elegantly with her long ears brushing the console edge, offered commentary in perfect deadpan. "Careful, if you tilt again, we may end up orbiting that asteroid backward." "What?" "I can orbit backward," Daniel said proudly, "but it is generally frowned upon by interstellar traffic controllers." Liara flicked an ear in amusement. "I see, we will try to avoid the authorities." What? When they arrived, the colony was already a tangle of oddities. Gravity modules had gone rogue, causing some sections to float above others like pieces of a misplaced puzzle. Robots scuttled across walls as though they had developed a taste for spatial gymnastics. A small alien creature with luminous skin and far too many legs for its size curled around Daniel's ankle, prompting a squeak that was somewhere between a laugh and a panic. Liara's hand found his shoulder, steadying him, and for the 100th time that day, Daniel felt the spark he had felt back on the Starliner, the quiet thrill of her touch grounding him amidst chaos. "You'll get used to this," she said, though her voice betrayed a hint of mischief. "Eventually." Daniel tried to look confident. "Yes, eventually, probably, hopefully before anything kills me." What? Liara's ears flicked once, her version of a smile. "Do you humans always exaggerate so dramatically?" "Only in life-or-death situations," Daniel said, gesturing at the floating gravity modules that threatened to crush anyone who misstepped. "It's part of our charm." They explored the colony together, navigating halls that twisted in ways that defied Euclidean logic. Daniel stumbled, tripped over a floating crate, and narrowly avoided being flattened by a malfunctioning service bot, all while Liara guided him with a mixture of patience and gentle teasing. "Do not run into walls," she said calmly, though the corner of her mouth hinted at amusement. "It is unbecoming of a human in my presence." "I'm not running," Daniel said, catching himself just in time. "I'm testing gravity." "Indeed." Liara's ears twitched as she surveyed the chaos. "Your testing method is unconventional but effective." In the central hub, they encountered the source of the anomalies, a rogue intelligence embedded in the colony's power grid, a shimmering, serpentine energy entity that slithered through conduits like liquid light. Daniel stared, then glanced at Liara, whose calm observation hid both fascination and something more dangerous, a glint of strategic calculation. "You're going to talk to it?" he asked cautiously. "Talk, reason, cajole, and possibly threaten," she said. "All approaches are valid when dealing with sentient energy. Humor is optional, but I recommend it." She turned to him, and for just a moment, her long ears caught the reflection of the entity in a way that made them glow like twin moons. "Try it, you may discover that humans have unexpected talents." Daniel swallowed. "Okay, high glowing energy thing, do you like jokes?" The entity pulsed, a ripple of light that shifted in color with what Daniel could only interpret as curiosity. Daniel laughed nervously. "I can do jokes, mostly about robots and coffee machines." Liara's hand rested on his shoulder, grounding him again. "Your humor may be what saves us," she said softly, and Daniel felt an odd pride mixed with terror. Somehow, he was becoming the kind of human who could make an alien laugh while negotiating with a power grid that might otherwise incinerate him. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time was difficult to measure when the colony seemed to warp space around them, and slowly, carefully, the entity accepted their presence. Daniel's humor, combined with Liara's calm authority, coaxed it into cooperation. By the end of the day, the gravity modules were stabilized, the rogue AI pacified, and Daniel had achieved something he had never thought possible. Not only had he survived, but he had done so while cracking jokes about space toilets and sentient mop droids. Liara's hand lingered on his shoulder as they prepared to leave the colony. "You performed admirably today," she said. "I am impressed." Daniel grinned, his chest swelling with a mix of pride, exhaustion, and that peculiar excitement that always came when she touched him. "I try my best, sometimes it works, mostly by accident." Her ears flicked in amusement. Accidents can be the most effective strategy. And as they ascended into the waiting Starliner, the universe stretched endlessly before them, full of strange worlds, absurd dangers, and unpredictable laughter. Daniel realized that for the first time in his life, he was not merely surviving in the stars, he was beginning to belong, and that belonged entirely to the alien woman with the long ears who had placed her hand on his shoulder and changed everything. The Starliner drifted through the void expanse, a stretch of space that was said to be both dangerous and spectacular, like a cosmic funhouse with gravity-defying mirrors and entirely the wrong number of black holes. Daniel sat at the helm, hands hovering over the controls, trying to convince himself that he was piloting the ship and not simply surviving a series of accidents that had somehow, by cosmic miracle, gone mostly in his favor. Liara leaned beside him, long ears brushing the console, as she examined a holographic map that flickered with unstable wormholes. "Do you ever get used to this?" Daniel asked, his voice a mixture of awe and exasperation. "I mean, navigating wormholes, rogue intelligence, zero-gravity mops, all in a day's work for someone who's just trying not to trip over their own feet." Liara's lips curved into a subtle smile. "You are remarkably adaptable for a human," she said. "Your humor, it helps. It keeps you alive in situations where your instincts might otherwise betray you." Daniel grinned. "Instincts are overrated anyway. I prefer panicking strategically." She flicked one of her ears in amusement, and Daniel felt the familiar thrill of her touch when her hand rested briefly on his shoulder, grounding him even amidst the subtle rocking of the ship's hull. "Strategic panicking," Liara said, "is often more effective than calm deliberation, as long as you do not mistake it for recklessness." Their current mission, unlike the gravity anomaly-riddled colony or the energy entity negotiations, involved a signal from the outer rim. A distress beacon that had persisted for months, emanating from a derelict freighter whose records indicated it was carrying experimental quantum crystals. Daniel and Liara had arrived to find the ship floating in a slow spin, its corridors dark, echoing with the occasional squeal of venting airlocks and the faint hum of malfunctioning systems. "You know," Daniel said, glancing at Liara, "in all my years of exploring, I never expected to find myself here, talking about strategic panic with an alien historian while investigating abandoned spacecraft. But somehow it makes sense." Liara's ears flicked once. It always makes sense when humans are involved in the strangest ways. As they boarded the freighter, they discovered the source of the distress. A colony of microdrones gone rogue, attempting to harvest the quantum crystals for reasons that no human or alien mind could logically justify. Daniel tried to reason with them, waving his arms like a conductor orchestrating a particularly chaotic symphony. "Hey, stop vibrating so aggressively. Maybe consider ethical mineral use." Liara observed, ear twitching, her expression a mixture of disbelief and subtle amusement. "You are unique, Daniel. I am impressed with your negotiation tactics." After a tense but humorously chaotic sequence involving magnetic grappling hooks, a rogue cleaning drone that tried to escort Daniel into a reactor core, and several sarcastic quips about zero-G etiquette, they managed to stabilize the freighter. The drones were redirected into containment chambers and the quantum crystals were secured. Daniel collapsed into a chair, exhausted, only to realize that Liara had been calmly monitoring him the whole time, her hand resting on his shoulder in reassurance. "You have changed," she said quietly, almost to herself. "You are no longer simply reacting. You observe, you anticipate, and somehow you do not entirely lose your sense of amusement." Daniel blinked. "Changed me. I just survived another day without dying horribly." Liara's smile softened. "Survival is a kind of growth. You have learned to blend instinct, humor, and reason in ways that many humans and many aliens fail to achieve." What? The ship's engines hummed with a calm efficiency that felt almost miraculous after the chaos of their missions. Daniel looked at Liara, noticing the way her ears caught the starlight, the faint silver veins highlighting the elegance of her form. He felt a warmth in his chest, a combination of admiration, relief, and something subtly dangerous. The acknowledgement that he was no longer the same man who had stumbled onto the observation deck weeks ago, catching screws midair and panicking quietly to himself. "Do you think we'll ever stop having adventures like this?" Daniel asked, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. Liara tilted her head, ears twitching in contemplation. "The universe does not often allow one to stop. But you will face it differently now, with humor, with courage, and occasionally with strategic panic." Daniel laughed, a sound that echoed through the bridge and seemed to make the stars themselves twinkle in approval. "I'll take that. But maybe next time, I could just try to survive without almost getting vaporized by a sentient mop." "Agreed," Liara said, though she allowed a hint of mischief in her tone. "Though I must admit, the mop had character." What? The freighter secured and the drones pacified, they set course back toward the Starliner. Daniel, seated beside Liara, realized that the thrill he had felt from the first touch of her hand had evolved into something more, a deep connection, a recognition that in the vast, absurd, dangerous expanse of the cosmos, he had found someone who understood both the fragility and the humor of life. As the Starliner slipped into hyperspace, Daniel allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He had survived chaos, navigated alien politics, negotiated with sentient energies, and learned to trust not only his instincts but the guidance and judgment of an alien companion. And through it all, he had laughed. He had learned that laughter